Ladies and gentlemen, there is a powerful truth you must understand about life. People can hurt you, but they cannot determine your destiny. Many individuals encounter narcissistic personalities, people who believe the world revolves around them, people who manipulate, control, and wound others for their own satisfaction. But listen carefully, when someone harms you through arrogance and cruelty, heaven does not ignore it. There is a divine system of justice that operates beyond human courts. One of the most important principles you must understand in life is that every action carries a consequence, whether people see it immediately or not. Many individuals who possess narcissistic tendencies believe they can hurt others without any long-term result. They manipulate, disrespect, and emotionally damage people while assuming they will escape accountability. But life does not function that way. The universe itself is built on laws, and one of the most powerful laws governing human behavior is the law of consequences. When someone intentionally harms another person, they may appear to win temporarily. They may gain control, attention, or a sense of superiority. In that moment, the victim often feels powerless and confused. You might ask yourself questions like, why did this happen to me? Or how can someone be so cruel and still succeed? These questions are natural, but they arise because we are looking at the situation through a short-term perspective rather than a long-term principle. Consequences do not always arrive immediately. In fact, the most powerful consequences in life usually unfold over time. Think of it like planting seeds. When a farmer plants seeds in the ground, the harvest does not appear the next day. The soil must go through a process. The seed must grow roots. Time must pass before the results become visible. Human behavior works in the same way. Every action plants a seed in the soil of life. A narcissistic person often plants seeds of pride, manipulation, deception, and emotional harm. These seeds may seem invisible at first, but eventually they grow into a harvest that cannot be avoided. For example, someone who consistently manipulates people eventually develops a reputation. Even if others do not immediately recognize their behavior, patterns reveal themselves over time. People begin to notice inconsistencies, broken promises, and emotional damage left behind in relationships. Once that awareness spreads, trust begins to disappear. Trust is one of the most valuable resources a human being can possess. It is the foundation of friendships, families, leadership, and influence. When trust erodes, opportunities begin to close. Relationships weaken, and the individual who once felt powerful suddenly finds themselves surrounded by suspicion and distance. Another consequence of harmful behavior is internal deterioration. Many narcissistic individuals appear confident on the surface, but their confidence is often a mask hiding deep insecurity. When someone continuously harms others to protect their ego, they slowly weaken their inner stability. They become dependent on validation, control, and admiration from others. Without those external sources, their identity begins to crumble. This is why you must never envy the person who hurt you. What may appear like victory today can actually be the beginning of their downfall tomorrow. The law of consequences operates quietly but powerfully. It does not require anger, revenge, or retaliation from you. It simply requires time. Your responsibility is not to focus on their harvest. Your responsibility is to focus on the seeds you are planting. When someone hurts you, you have two choices. You can plant seeds of bitterness, resentment, and revenge, or you can plant seeds of growth, wisdom, healing, and strength. The seeds you choose will determine the future you experience. If you choose bitterness, you allow the person who hurt you to continue controlling your emotional life. But if you choose growth, you transform the painful experience into a powerful lesson. You develop stronger boundaries. You learn how to recognize unhealthy behavior earlier. You become wiser about relationships and more protective of your peace. Over time, this transformation becomes your greatest advantage. While the narcissistic individual continues repeating destructive patterns, you evolve. You become emotionally stronger, spiritually grounded, and mentally sharper. The pain that once felt like a burden becomes the training ground that prepared you for a better life. Remember this carefully. Life always collects its debts. No harmful action disappears into nothingness. Every word, every decision, and every behavior contributes to a future outcome. The person who harms others is building a future shaped by their actions, just as the person who chooses integrity is building a future shaped by wisdom. So instead of wasting energy asking why someone hurt you, focus on becoming the kind of person whose character cannot be destroyed by someone else's broken behavior. When you do that, the law of consequences begins working in your favor, and eventually your life will produce a harvest of peace, strength, and lasting influence. One of the greatest lessons a person must understand in life is that character always produces consequences. Every action, every intention, and every attitude we carry toward others eventually returns to us in some form. When someone operates with arrogance, manipulation, and emotional cruelty, they may appear powerful for a moment, but their behavior quietly plants the seeds of their own suffering. A narcissistic person often believes they are smarter than everyone else, stronger than everyone else, and beyond accountability. They build their identity around superiority. They think their words cannot be challenged, their actions cannot be questioned, and their behavior cannot be exposed. But life has a way of balancing things. The universe is designed with moral laws just as strong as physical laws. When someone repeatedly hurts people, lies, manipulates emotions, and destroys trust, they create a cycle of consequences that slowly unfolds over time. You may feel frustrated because sometimes it looks like the person who hurt you is succeeding. They might still have influence, attention, or admiration from others. But what many people fail to realize is that success without character is temporary. Character is the true foundation of a lasting life. When a narcissistic individual harms others, they damage something more valuable than money or reputation. They damage the trust that sustains relationships. Trust is the invisible glue that holds families, friendships, partnerships, and communities together. Once that trust begins to break, the person may not notice it immediately. But slowly, quietly, people begin to step away. Opportunities disappear. Support weakens. Loyalty fades. The narcissistic individual often does not understand why people are leaving, because arrogance blinds them to their own behavior. This is why you must never allow the pain someone caused you to push you toward revenge. Revenge is an emotional reaction, but wisdom is a disciplined response. When you attempt to retaliate, you lower yourself into the same destructive mindset that caused the harm in the first place. But when you step back and allow time, truth, and divine justice to work, you protect your dignity and preserve your peace. History and life experience repeatedly show that those who exploit others eventually face the results of their own actions. The same pride that made them feel powerful becomes the weakness that causes their downfall. Arrogance convinces them they do not need wisdom, correction, or humility. And because they reject correction, they continue making decisions that slowly dismantle their own lives. Another powerful truth you must understand is that your response to pain determines your future. When someone hurts you, you stand at a crossroads. One path leads toward bitterness, resentment, and emotional imprisonment. The other path leads toward growth, self-understanding, and transformation. Many people unknowingly allow the narcissist to control their lives, even after the relationship ends, because they remain emotionally trapped in anger and hurt. But when you choose healing instead of hatred, you reclaim your power. Pain, when processed with wisdom, can become one of the greatest teachers in life. It teaches you to recognize unhealthy personalities. It strengthens your boundaries. It deepens your emotional intelligence. It makes you more aware of the value of respect, empathy, and sincerity. What a narcissistic person intended as destruction can become the very tool that refines you into a stronger individual. Your suffering can sharpen your perception and strengthen your spirit. Instead of allowing the experience to define you as a victim, you can use it as a moment of awakening. You begin to understand the importance of protecting your peace, guarding your self-worth, and surrounding yourself with people who value honesty and kindness. The narcissistic person may spend years chasing admiration and control, but a person who grows through pain develops something far more powerful: inner stability and wisdom. And here is the deeper truth many people eventually realize: people who harm others often live with a kind of inner emptiness. Their need to dominate, manipulate, or belittle others usually comes from insecurity and unresolved internal struggles. While they appear confident on the surface, they are often deeply dissatisfied internally. This does not excuse their behavior, but it helps explain why their lives often remain unstable. Meanwhile, the person who chooses healing begins building a life that is grounded in purpose, character, and emotional strength. So the real victory after being hurt by a narcissistic person is not seeing them fail. The real victory is becoming a wiser, stronger, and more peaceful version of yourself. When you grow beyond the pain, you prove that someone else's broken character could not destroy your destiny. Over time, integrity, patience, and resilience create opportunities that bitterness never could. While arrogance eventually collapses under its own weight, a life built on humility, wisdom, and purpose continues to rise. And that transformation becomes the greatest evidence that pain does not have the final word in your story. One of the most important lessons a person must understand in life is the power of self control when dealing with people who hurt them. When a narcissistic individual wounds you emotionally, manipulates your feelings, or tries to damage your dignity, the natural human reaction is retaliation. The mind immediately begins to imagine ways to respond, defend, or even punish the person who caused the pain. However, true wisdom teaches a higher principle. The strength of a person is not measured by how loudly they react, but by how wisely they respond. Silence and self-control are not signs of weakness. They are signs of maturity and authority over one's emotions. A narcissistic person thrives on reactions. They feed on arguments, emotional chaos, and the attention that comes from conflict. When you react impulsively, you unintentionally provide them with the very energy they desire. But when you remain calm, thoughtful, and disciplined, you remove the fuel that sustains their behavior. Self-control places you in a position of psychological and spiritual power. Instead of being controlled by anger or pain, you become the master of your responses. Education teaches us that emotional intelligence is one of the highest forms of intelligence. Anyone can react in anger, but only a disciplined mind can pause, reflect, and choose a wise response. When someone insults you, betrays you, or attempts to humiliate you, the most powerful statement you can make is not revenge, but composure. Your silence communicates confidence. Your calmness communicates strength. Your refusal to engage in toxic battles communicates that your life is guided by principles rather than impulses. Another profound truth that many people must learn is the difference between human revenge and divine justice. Human beings often feel a deep desire to see immediate punishment when they are wronged. When someone mistreats us, we want the situation corrected instantly. We want fairness, acknowledgement, and sometimes even public vindication. But life does not always operate according to our emotional timeline. Justice often works quietly, gradually, and in ways we cannot initially see. When you try to personally punish every person who hurts you, you exhaust your energy and distract yourself from your own growth. The more you focus on revenge, the more control the offender continues to have over your thoughts and emotions. But when you release the need to personally settle every score, you free your mind to concentrate on your purpose. Trusting that justice exists does not mean you tolerate abuse or remain silent about wrongdoing. Rather, it means you understand that ultimate accountability lies beyond your personal hands. Throughout history, individuals who abused power, manipulated others, or operated with arrogance eventually faced consequences. Reputation collapses, relationships dissolve, and influence fades when character is built on deception. Justice does not always arrive dramatically, but it arrives consistently. The moral structure of life ensures that destructive behavior eventually exposes itself. When you understand this principle, you stop feeling pressured to prove yourself to those who wronged you. You focus instead on becoming a person of integrity, stability, and wisdom. Another important educational principle is understanding that pain can become preparation. Many people see hurtful experiences only as damage, something that weakens them or leaves permanent scars. However, adversity often carries within it the potential for transformation. When someone hurts you deeply, the experience forces you to develop awareness about people, boundaries, and your own emotional strength. The very pain that once seemed unbearable can eventually become a powerful teacher. Personal growth rarely occurs in comfort. It is often through disappointment, betrayal, and hardship that individuals develop resilience and wisdom. A narcissistic relationship, for example, can teach someone how to recognize manipulation, how to protect their emotional space, and how to value healthy relationships. These lessons are difficult, but they shape stronger individuals. Pain becomes a classroom where the lessons are intense but extremely valuable. When you begin to view painful experiences through this educational lens, your perspective changes dramatically. Instead of seeing yourself only as a victim, you begin to see yourself as a student of life. Every challenge becomes information. Every conflict becomes insight. Every disappointment becomes a stepping stone toward greater maturity. Ultimately, the goal is not merely to survive painful encounters with narcissistic individuals, but to emerge wiser, stronger, and more purposeful. The person who hurt you may have intended to diminish your confidence or disrupt your life, but the outcome does not have to align with their intentions. By practicing self-control, trusting the principle of justice, and allowing pain to develop your character, you transform a negative experience into a powerful catalyst for personal evolution. In the end, the greatest victory is not seeing someone else fall. It is watching yourself rise above circumstances that once threatened to break you. True success is becoming a person whose character, wisdom, and peace cannot be easily shaken by the behavior of others. One of the most powerful truths a person must understand in life is that you are not responsible for executing justice when someone harms you. Many people believe that if someone hurts them, betrays them, humiliates them, or manipulates them, they must somehow retaliate, prove a point, or make the other person suffer. But wisdom teaches a different principle. Human revenge often produces more damage than healing. When you try to fight darkness with darkness, you eventually become part of the darkness you were trying to defeat. A narcissistic person thrives on reaction. Their ego feeds on attention, arguments, emotional chaos, and control. When they hurt someone, they expect retaliation because conflict keeps them at the center of the story. The moment you respond with anger, shouting revenge, or public humiliation, you unknowingly enter their battlefield. And on that battlefield, they feel powerful because chaos is their natural environment. But there is a higher level of strength. True strength is the ability to step above the emotional trap. It is the discipline to refuse participation in destructive cycles. When you choose wisdom instead of revenge, you protect something far more valuable than temporary satisfaction. You protect your character, your peace, and your future. You must understand that life itself carries a system of accountability. Every action produces consequences, whether visible immediately or revealed over time. A narcissistic person may appear to win in the short term. They may manipulate situations, damage reputations, twist narratives, or control perceptions. For a moment, it may look like they escaped the consequences of their behavior. But time is the great revealer of character. When someone consistently operates through pride, manipulation, and emotional harm, they slowly destroy the foundation of their own life. Relationships weaken because people eventually recognize patterns. Trust erodes because repeated deception cannot remain hidden forever. Influence fades because character always determines credibility. These outcomes occur not because someone took revenge, but because destructive behavior carries its own built-in consequences. This is why wisdom advises you not to waste your energy trying to punish people. You were not created to be the judge of every offense committed against you. Your life has a greater assignment than managing the downfall of others. Your true assignment is growth, purpose, and transformation. Think about this carefully. Every moment you spend obsessing over someone who hurt you is a moment stolen from your own development. Every hour spent plotting revenge is an hour not invested in your own success. The greatest tragedy is not that someone wounded you. The greatest tragedy would be allowing that wound to control your future. There is a powerful freedom that comes when you release the responsibility of revenge. When you understand that justice does not depend on your anger, you gain the ability to move forward without emotional chains. Your peace becomes stronger than their offense. Your vision becomes bigger than their behavior. This does not mean ignoring wrongdoing or accepting abuse. Wisdom still requires boundaries. Distance is sometimes necessary. Protecting your mental and emotional well-being is a form of wisdom, not weakness. You can walk away from harmful people without carrying hatred in your heart. You can refuse manipulation without becoming bitter. You can build a new chapter of life without constantly reopening old wounds. In fact, the most powerful response to narcissistic harm is progress. When you grow stronger, wiser, and more focused, you remove yourself from the environment where their influence once affected you. Your silence becomes strength. Your discipline becomes protection. Your progress becomes proof that their actions did not define your destiny. Many people who were hurt by narcissistic individuals later discover something remarkable. The pain that once felt unbearable became the catalyst for their personal transformation. They developed stronger boundaries, deeper emotional intelligence, clearer priorities, and a stronger sense of identity. What was meant to weaken them actually sharpened their awareness. This is why you must never interpret pain as the end of your story. Pain can be a teacher. It exposes unhealthy dynamics. It reveals the difference between genuine love and manipulation. It forces you to examine your standards, your values, and the kind of people you allow into your life. When you embrace growth instead of revenge, something powerful happens. You move from being a victim of someone's behavior to becoming the architect of your own future. Your energy shifts from destruction to construction. Instead of trying to tear someone else down, you begin building a stronger version of yourself. And when that transformation occurs, the person who once tried to harm you loses the very thing they were seeking: control over your life. Your healing becomes your victory. Your peace becomes your strength. Your progress becomes your answer. Remember this: truth revenge might satisfy emotion for a moment, but purpose satisfies the soul for a lifetime. When you choose wisdom over retaliation, you rise above the chaos and step into a life that is no longer defined by the actions of others. but by the strength of your own character. A narcissistic person often builds their identity on the illusion of superiority. They believe their opinions are always right. Their needs are always more important, and their actions should never be questioned. At first, such individuals may appear powerful or confident, but this type of confidence is usually rooted in insecurity rather than true strength. Real strength is demonstrated through humility, empathy, and the ability to respect others. When someone repeatedly hurts people through manipulation, arrogance, or emotional abuse, they are slowly damaging the very foundation of their own life. Pride creates a false sense of control, but in reality it blinds a person to their own weaknesses. Over time, people begin to recognize the pattern of selfish behavior, and the admiration the narcissist once enjoyed begins to fade. The lesson here is educational, and important character determines destiny. If someone allows pride to dominate their personality, they eventually create circumstances that lead to their own suffering. In contrast, when a person develops humility and emotional intelligence, they build relationships that last and a reputation that grows stronger with time. Another powerful principle is the law of consequences. Every action a human being takes produces a reaction, whether immediately or gradually. When someone intentionally hurts others, spreads lies, manipulates emotions, or abuses trust, they are setting a chain of consequences into motion. A narcissist may believe they are winning in the moment because they can control or intimidate others, but life has a way of balancing the scales. Relationships begin to break, opportunities disappear, and people who once supported them slowly withdraw. Trust is extremely valuable in human society. It functions like social currency. When trust is repeatedly violated, it becomes almost impossible to rebuild. Eventually, people stop believing the narcissist's words, stop relying on their promises, and stop investing emotionally in them. This loss of trust becomes one of the most painful consequences because it isolates the individual from meaningful connections. The educational message here is clear. The way we treat others determines the quality of our future. A person who chooses integrity, kindness, and respect plants seeds of long-term success, while someone who chooses manipulation and cruelty plants seeds of eventual failure. One of the most visible consequences of narcissistic behavior is isolation. Human beings are naturally drawn to people who make them feel valued, respected, and understood. Narcissists, however, often treat others as tools rather than as individuals with feelings. They may exploit friendships, dominate conversations, dismiss others' emotions, or constantly seek admiration without offering genuine care in return. Over time, people begin to feel drained and unappreciated, and they gradually distance themselves. At first, the narcissist may not notice because their focus remains on themselves. But eventually they look around and realize that genuine friendships have disappeared. They may still have acquaintances or temporary supporters, but the deep, loyal relationships that provide emotional stability are missing. This isolation becomes a severe punishment because humans thrive in community. Without authentic relationships, life becomes empty and unstable. The important lesson is that respect and empathy are essential ingredients for lasting relationships. When someone consistently uplifts others, they create a supportive network that strengthens their life. But when someone constantly elevates themselves at the expense of others, they unknowingly build walls that separate them from the very people they need. Another consequence appears internally rather than externally: emotional emptiness. Narcissism focuses heavily on image, praise, and validation. A narcissistic person often spends enormous energy trying to maintain a perfect appearance or prove their superiority. However, external validation cannot permanently satisfy the human soul. Even if they receive admiration for a time, the satisfaction quickly fades, creating a constant hunger for more attention. This cycle becomes exhausting and ultimately leads to deep dissatisfaction. The person may appear confident outwardly, but internally they struggle with insecurity, restlessness, and fear of losing their status. Because they rarely develop genuine emotional connections, they also lack the comfort and reassurance that healthy relationships provide. This inner emptiness is one of the most severe punishments because it affects daily life. The lesson for anyone observing this pattern is profound. True fulfillment does not come from controlling others or dominating situations. It comes from meaningful relationships, purposeful living, and personal integrity. When individuals focus on growth, compassion, and self-awareness, they create inner peace that external praise cannot replace. Finally, the long-term result of unchecked arrogance is eventual downfall. History, leadership studies, and psychological research repeatedly demonstrate that pride often precedes collapse. When a person becomes convinced that they are superior and cannot be challenged, They stop listening to advice, ignore constructive criticism, and make reckless decisions. This pattern gradually weakens their position in relationships, workplaces, and communities. Opportunities that once seemed secure begin to disappear because people no longer trust their judgment or character. Eventually, the reputation they worked so hard to build begins to crumble. This downfall may occur socially, professionally, or emotionally, but the pattern remains consistent. Arrogance destroys stability. The educational takeaway is extremely valuable. A wise person understands that humility is not weakness. It is a form of strength that keeps a person open to learning and growth. By remaining teachable, respectful, and self-aware, individuals protect themselves from the destructive cycle that often consumes those driven by narcissism. One of the most important truths about life is that pain can either break you or build you. When someone with a narcissistic personality wounds you, it often feels confusing, unfair, and deeply personal. Narcissistic individuals usually operate from a place of pride, self-importance, and emotional manipulation. They tend to see others not as partners or companions, but as tools to serve their ego. Because of this mindset, they may lie, blame, gaslight, or emotionally harm people while convincing themselves they are always right. But there is a powerful principle woven into the fabric of life. Every behavior carries consequences. You may not see those consequences immediately, but destructive character eventually produces destructive outcomes. A narcissistic person may appear powerful for a moment. They may seem confident, admired, or even successful. However, what people often do not see is that pride creates a silent erosion within their life. Pride slowly damages relationships, destroys trust, and isolates the individual from genuine love and support. When someone constantly elevates themselves above others, they unknowingly create distance between themselves and the very people they need. Over time, people begin to recognize manipulation and emotional abuse. As awareness grows, the narcissist begins to experience the first major consequence: isolation. The same pride that once attracted attention eventually pushes people away. Another consequence that inevitably follows narcissistic behavior is the loss of trust. Trust is one of the most valuable assets in any relationship, whether personal, professional, or social. It takes years to build, but only moments to destroy. Narcissistic individuals often manipulate situations, twist facts, and shift blame to protect their ego. In the beginning, some people may believe them, but truth has a remarkable ability to surface. When people begin to notice patterns of dishonesty and manipulation, trust collapses. And when trust collapses, influence disappears. Without trust, even the most charismatic personality cannot maintain lasting respect. There is also a deeper consequence that many people overlook: the inner emptiness that narcissism creates. While narcissists often appear confident and self-assured, their identity is frequently built on fragile foundations. Their sense of worth depends on constant admiration, validation, and control over others. This creates an exhausting cycle where they must continuously seek attention and praise just to feel valuable. Yet no amount of external validation can fill an internal void. As time passes, many narcissistic individuals experience dissatisfaction, restlessness, and emotional instability because their identity was never built on genuine character or purpose. Eventually, character reveals itself through reputation. A person may maintain a mask for a while, but consistent behavior always exposes the truth. When someone repeatedly harms others, manipulates situations, or refuses accountability, people begin to talk. Stories connect, experiences overlap, and the image that the narcissist works so hard to maintain begins to fracture. Reputation, once damaged, becomes extremely difficult to restore. In this way, the very behavior they used to gain power becomes the reason they lose credibility and respect. However, the most important lesson in this situation is not about the downfall of the narcissist. It is about the transformation of the person who was hurt. Pain, although uncomfortable, has the potential to become a powerful teacher. It can sharpen your awareness, strengthen your boundaries, and deepen your emotional intelligence. Many people who experience narcissistic relationships eventually develop stronger discernment. They learn how to recognize manipulation, value honesty, and prioritize healthy relationships. In this way, what was once a painful experience becomes a source of wisdom and growth. The key is to resist the temptation of revenge. Revenge may feel satisfying for a moment, but it rarely produces healing or progress. When you dedicate your energy to retaliation, you remain emotionally connected to the person who hurt you. True freedom comes when you release the need to punish them and instead focus on rebuilding your own life. Growth, peace, and personal success are far more powerful responses than bitterness. Life ultimately rewards character more than ego. While arrogance may rise quickly, it rarely stands for long. Character, humility, and integrity create foundations that endure. So when someone with narcissistic tendencies harms you, remember that their behavior reflects their internal condition, not your worth. Your responsibility is not to carry their negativity, but to rise above it. When you choose healing instead of hatred, wisdom instead of revenge, and purpose instead of pain, you reclaim your power. And in the long run, a life built on strength of character will always outlast a life built on pride. One of the most powerful principles you must understand in life is the principle of character. A narcissistic person operates from a mindset of superiority. They believe they must always be admired, always be right, and always be the center of attention. But true strength in life is not built on pride. It is built on character, humility, and self-awareness. Character is what determines how a person treats others when they have power. When someone consistently hurts, manipulates, or humiliates people, it reveals a deeper issue within their heart. The lesson for you is not to become bitter, but to become wiser. When you understand the difference between ego and character, you stop expecting healthy behavior from unhealthy people. This awareness protects your peace and helps you respond with wisdom instead of emotional reactions. Another powerful law operating in life is the law of moral consequences. Every action produces a reaction. Every seed produces a harvest. People who intentionally cause emotional damage to others often believe they will escape the consequences of their behavior. They assume their charm, intelligence, or manipulation will protect them forever. But life does not work that way. Time has a way of exposing patterns, and patterns eventually reveal truth. When someone repeatedly harms others, they are quietly building the circumstances of their own downfall. The universe operates on principles of balance and justice. What you sow into relationships eventually returns to you in some form. That is why it is important for you to choose integrity, even when you have been mistreated. A crucial skill in dealing with difficult personalities is the power of silence and self-control. When a narcissistic person hurts you, your natural instinct may be to defend yourself, argue, or prove them wrong. But emotional reactions often give them the attention and control they desire. Wisdom teaches you that silence can be stronger than confrontation. Self-control is not weakness, it is discipline. When you refuse to engage in toxic battles, you preserve your dignity and protect your mental clarity. The ability to walk away from unnecessary conflict is a sign of emotional maturity. You are demonstrating that your peace is more valuable than winning arguments. There is also an important difference between divine justice and human revenge. Many people waste years of their lives trying to prove something to the people who hurt them. They want validation, apologies, or public recognition of the wrong that was done. But justice is not your assignment. Your assignment is growth. When you release the burden of revenge, you free your mind and energy for better things. Justice operates beyond human manipulation. What is hidden eventually becomes visible. What is dishonest eventually collapses. Trust that fairness exists beyond your personal intervention. Narcissistic behavior carries natural consequences that eventually become severe punishments. The first consequence is isolation. Pride slowly pushes people away because relationships require empathy, listening, and respect. When someone constantly demands admiration but never gives genuine care, people eventually withdraw. The second consequence is the loss of trust. Trust is the foundation of every healthy relationship, and once it is damaged repeatedly, it becomes nearly impossible to restore. The third consequence is a damaged reputation. A person may control their image temporarily, but long-term behavior always exposes the truth. The fourth consequence is inner emptiness. Narcissism feeds the ego but starves the heart, leaving a person constantly chasing validation but never feeling satisfied. The final consequence is inevitable collapse because arrogance eventually destroys the very platform it stands on. For the person who has been hurt, pain can become preparation. Difficult experiences often sharpen your understanding of human nature. They teach you to recognize warning signs, establish boundaries, and protect your emotional well-being. Pain can transform into wisdom if you allow it to educate you instead of harden you. Many strong individuals develop their greatest strength through adversity. The very experience that wounded you can also become the experience that prepares you for greater emotional intelligence and resilience. Finally, you must remember that your life is larger than the pain someone caused you. A narcissistic person may try to control your emotions, damage your confidence, or distract you from your purpose. But your destiny is not determined by someone else's behavior. Your future is shaped by your decisions, your growth, and your willingness to rise above negative experiences. When you focus on purpose instead of bitterness, you move forward with clarity and strength. The most powerful response to narcissistic harm is not revenge, it is transformation. When you grow, heal, and build a meaningful life, you prove that pain did not define you. It refined you. Human character is the foundation of every relationship and every destiny. When a person develops a narcissistic personality, they begin to believe that they are the center of everything. Their thoughts, their desires, and their ego become more important than the feelings and well-being of others. But true strength in life never comes from pride, it comes from humility and character. A person who builds their life on arrogance may look powerful on the outside, yet their foundation is weak. Character, integrity, and humility are the qualities that sustain a person for a lifetime. When someone hurts you through narcissism, remember that their behavior is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of their broken character. There is also a powerful law operating in life known as the law of consequences. Every action carries a reaction. Every seed produces a harvest. People who spread kindness eventually experience trust, loyalty, and peace. But people who intentionally harm others plant seeds of conflict, loneliness, and regret. This law operates whether someone believes in it or not. When a narcissist causes emotional damage, manipulates others, or abuses trust, they are planting seeds that will eventually return to them. Understanding this principle protects you from bitterness, because you realize that justice is already built into the structure of life itself. Another important principle is the power of silence and self-control. When someone hurts you deeply, the natural human reaction is anger, retaliation, or revenge. But responding emotionally often damages you more than it damages the other person. True wisdom is the ability to control your reaction, even when you cannot control someone's behavior. Silence does not mean weakness. Sometimes silence is the highest form of strength. When you refuse to engage in toxic battles, you protect your peace, your dignity, and your future. Self-control allows you to rise above situations that could otherwise pull you into negativity. It is also important to understand the difference between divine justice and human revenge. Many people spend years trying to prove themselves, expose their enemies, or punish those who hurt them. But when you spend your life chasing revenge, you waste the energy that should be used to build your future. Justice does not belong to human emotion. It belongs to a higher moral order. When you release the desire to punish others, you free your mind and spirit. Instead of focusing on those who harmed you, you focus on growth, healing, and purpose. Narcissistic behavior eventually produces severe consequences in a person's life. One of the most powerful punishments is isolation. Narcissists may initially attract attention, admiration, or followers, but their selfish behavior gradually pushes people away. Relationships require empathy, honesty, and respect. When those qualities are missing, relationships collapse. Over time, the narcissistic individual finds themselves surrounded by fewer genuine connections because people grow tired of manipulation and emotional harm. Another consequence is the loss of trust and credibility. Trust is the most valuable currency in human relationships. Once people realize that someone is manipulative, dishonest, or self-centered, they begin to distance themselves emotionally and socially. Without trust, influence disappears, opportunities close, friendships fade, and respect diminishes. A person may try to protect their image, but eventually their consistent behavior reveals the truth about their character. There is also the internal punishment of emptiness. Narcissism feeds the ego but leaves the soul unsatisfied. Even if a narcissistic person gains attention, control, or temporary admiration, they often struggle with deep insecurity and dissatisfaction. They constantly need validation because their identity is built on external approval rather than inner peace. This inner emptiness can become one of the most painful consequences of a self-centered life. Finally, there is the principle of downfall. Pride often creates the illusion of invincibility, but history repeatedly shows that arrogance eventually leads to collapse. When a person refuses correction, ignores wisdom, and continues harming others, they gradually destroy their own reputation, relationships, and opportunities. The higher pride rises, the harder the fall becomes. However, the most important lesson is not about the narcissist, it is about you. Painful experiences can become powerful teachers. The hurt you experienced can sharpen your wisdom, strengthen your boundaries, and help you recognize healthier relationships in the future. Instead of allowing someone's behavior to weaken you, you can allow the experience to refine you. Growth, healing, and purpose are the greatest responses to pain. When you focus on building a life of integrity, peace, and strength, you prove that someone else's cruelty does not have the power to define your destiny. when you heal, when you rise, when you build a life of purpose, peace, and integrity. You demonstrate a power that narcissism can never understand. Remember this principle: you cannot control how people treat you, but you can control who you become because of it. So stand tall, protect your heart, strengthen your character, and walk forward in purpose. Because in the end, arrogance collapses, but character endures.